Imagine a civilization so old, so rich, that it shaped the world as we know it. Yet most people barely scratch the surface of its story. Iran isn't just some faraway place on a map. It's the birthplace of empires that stretched across continents, where kings ruled with wisdom and power unlike anything you've heard before. And guess what? The secrets of its past, wars, revolutions, cultural revolutions, are way more intense than any history class ever made them sound. Trust me, this isn't going to be your usual dry, dusty history lesson. We're just here to learn about the empires, moments, and people that shaped Iran's journey through time. So buckle up, because by the end of this, you might just see Iran in a whole new light, and maybe even be surprised by how much it still shapes today's world. Welcome to the History Sleepcast. Before we begin, if you enjoy drifting off to stories of ancient empires, forgotten legends, and the quiet echoes of history, consider subscribing to our channel. New episodes every week. All right, let's start with where it all began, geography. Iran is this incredible land that sits right at the crossroads of Asia. Think of it as a giant natural bridge connecting the Middle East, Central Asia, and even parts of South Asia. Its landscape is wild and varied. Mountains that soar high like the Zagros and Alborz, ranges vast deserts stretching for miles, fertile plains, and rivers that have fed civilizations for thousands of years. This unique geography made Iran a natural gateway for trade and cultural exchange. If you've ever heard of the Silk Road, that legendary ancient trade route, guess what? A huge chunk of it passed through what is now Iran, meaning goods, ideas, and people from distant lands all mingled here. This wasn't just a place where empires rose and fell. It was a melting pot where cultures collided and blended. Now, long before the famous Persian Empire even existed, the land was home to some of the earliest known civilizations. One of the first major cultures was the Elamites, who emerged around 3000 BCE in what we now call southwestern Iran. Archaeologists have uncovered their ancient city of Susa, which became a major center of politics and culture. What's fascinating is that the Elamites developed their own language and writing, showing us that this wasn't just a backwater, but a sophisticated society with its own identity. Fun fact, they left behind thousands of stone tablets inscribed with a mysterious Proto-Elamite script that remains undeciphered, leaving their exact origins a mystery. Iran's early inhabitants lived off the land, farming and domesticating animals, taking advantage of the fertile river valleys. This laid down the foundation for more complex societies to develop. The region was rich in natural resources, minerals, metals, and fertile soil that helped fuel growth and innovation. These early civilizations set the stage for what was to come, the rise of one of history's greatest empires. So when we talk about the history of Iran, it's important to understand that it's not defined by a single empire or dynasty. It's a long, layered story that begins with early peoples carving out settlements in a rugged land, navigating deserts, mountains, and rivers, and gradually connecting to the broader world through ancient trade routes. This rich foundation gave rise to more complex societies. Then, around 1500 BCE, a wave of Indo-European migrants, known as the Aryans, arrived. They brought with them new languages and spiritual ideas that would leave a lasting imprint on the region. Among these migrating groups were two that would eventually shape the future of Iran: the Medes and the Persians. By the 7th century BCE, the Medes had established a formidable empire. But just as they were reaching their peak, a bold leader emerged from a small kingdom called Persis, and with him, history was about to take a dramatic turn. His name? Cyrus the Great, and he was about to change everything. Now, we're not going to dive too deep into Cyrus the Great's life in this episode. There's just way too much ground to cover. But if you'd like a full video all about his rise, his legacy, and the stories behind the legend, let me know in the comments. I'd love to make that happen. Now, back to the story. In 550 BCE, Cyrus led a rebellion against the Medes. At the Battle of Pasargadae, he defeated the Median king Astyages and declared himself ruler of a new empire, the Achaemenid Empire. Under Cyrus, Persia exploded onto the world stage. His conquests were fast, smart, and strategic. He didn't just defeat enemies, he earned their loyalty. When he took Babylon, he didn't burn it down. He respected its temples and famously freed the Jewish people from captivity. His declaration, the Cyrus Cylinder, is sometimes called the world's first charter of human rights. And that was just the beginning. The Achaemenid Empire would grow into the largest empire the world had seen, stretching from the Balkans to the Indus Valley. It was a diverse, multicultural empire run through a smart system of satraps, regional governors, connected by the royal road, and influenced by Zoroastrianism, a faith built on the idea of good thoughts, good words, good deeds. But empires have rivals. Persia's expansion eventually brought it into conflict with the Greek city-states. You've probably heard of Marathon, Thermopylae, Salamis, epic battles that shaped the Western imagination. But behind every Greek victory was an empire vast enough to strike fear across continents. Then came Alexander. In 331 BCE, Alexander the Great defeated the last Achaemenid king, Darius III. Persia fell, but not quietly. Alexander respected Persian culture, even marrying into its royal family. Under his rule and the later Seleucid dynasty, Greek and Persian cultures blended. Temples were built in Greek style. Persian art was mixed with Hellenistic themes. And once again, Iran proved it could absorb foreign rule without losing its identity. But the Greeks didn't last. The Sasanian Empire was left exhausted and in turmoil after decades of war with the Byzantine Empire and crippling internal strife. The assassination of King Khosrow II plunged the empire into chaos, with a rapid succession of weak rulers leaving it politically unstable and financially drained. This power vacuum set the stage for a new, formidable force emerging from the Arabian Peninsula. The Sasanian Empire eventually fell to the Arab Muslim armies, marking one of the most profound turning points in Iran's history. Islam took root, and over time, it brought sweeping cultural and linguistic changes. But here's the twist: Persian culture didn't vanish. It adapted. It absorbed the new influences and reshaped them into something uniquely Iranian. Persian evolved into a new literary language, written in Arabic script but filled with pre-Islamic soul. That's how we got Ferdowsi's Shahnameh, a 50,000-verse epic poem that preserved Iran's ancient legends and identity. The centuries that followed were anything but peaceful. Iran became a magnet for wave after wave of invasions. In 1040, the Seljuk Turks rose to power. They were fierce warriors who built a vast empire stretching from Central Asia all the way to Anatolia. But they weren't just conquerors, they were also builders. Under their rule, Islamic art, science, and architecture flourished in Persia. This was a golden age of learning, and Persian culture played a central role in the Islamic world. But that stability didn't last. In 1219, the Mongols swept in, led by none other than Genghis Khan. And let's be honest, when the Mongols showed up, they didn't knock. They smashed. Cities were burned to the ground. Entire populations were wiped out. The destruction was massive. And when they sacked Baghdad in 1258, it wasn't just the fall of a city, it was the end of the Abbasid Caliphate, the heart of the Islamic world. As if that weren't enough, things got even more chaotic under Tamerlane, also known as Timur. From 1370 to 1405, he brought another wave of devastation. His campaigns were brutal, and Persia took another beating. But Persia always rebuilds. In 1501, a new dynasty rose from the ashes, the Safavids. Led by Shah Ismail, they didn't just bring stability, they transformed Iran forever. The Safavids declared Shur-e Islam the state religion. That one decision changed the entire course of Iranian history. It gave Iran a distinct religious identity that set it apart from its Sunni neighbors and still defines the country to this day. Under the Safavids, Iranian culture experienced a rebirth. The city of Isfahan became a masterpiece in itself, filled with stunning mosques, palaces, and gardens. Even today, it's considered one of the most beautiful cities in the world. But like all great dynasties, the Safavids eventually declined. By the early 1700s, internal struggles and outside threats left the empire weak. And in 1722, Afghan invaders stormed in, throwing the country into chaos once again. By the late 1700s, Iran was fractured. After years of invasions and civil war, the country needed stability, and that's when the Qajar dynasty stepped in. The Qajars were originally a Turkoman tribe that had been active during the late Safavid period. Their leader, Aga Muhammad Khan Qajar, was as ruthless as he was determined. His mission? Reunify Iran, no matter the cost. By 1794, he had crushed rival factions, including the last of the Zand dynasty, and taken Isfahan, the old Safavid capital. 2 years later, he crowned himself Shah in Tehran, which he strategically picked as the new capital to tighten his grip on both the north and south. Tehran has remained Iran's capital ever since. But Aga Muhammad Khan's reign didn't last long. He was assassinated in 1797. Still, the dynasty lived on. His successor, Fath Ali Shah Qajar, ruled from 1797 to 1834 and oversaw a period of cultural revival. Under his watch, European influences began to trickle into Iran. New technology, Western fashion, even changes in art and architecture. The country slowly opened up to the outside world. But beneath the surface, things weren't looking great. The Qajar period was also marked by growing weakness. Iran found itself caught in a dangerous tug-of-war between two expanding empires, Russia in the north and Britain in the south. Both were eager to carve out influence over Iran, and they didn't play nice. This external pressure led to costly wars and humiliating treaties that chipped away at Iran's sovereignty. Territory was lost, power was compromised, and the once mighty kingdom found itself struggling to hold onto its independence in a world dominated by imperial giants. The pressure on Iran wasn't just diplomatic, it turned into full-blown war. Between 1804 and 1813, Iran faced off against the Russian Empire in the First Russo-Persian War. It ended badly. Under the Treaty of Gulistan, Iran was forced to hand over huge chunks of the Caucasus, modern-day eastern Georgia, Dagestan, and parts of Azerbaijan and Armenia. That wasn't just a loss of land, it was a massive blow to Iran's pride and geopolitical influence. But things didn't stop there. In 1826, another war broke out. Once again, Iran went to battle with Russia, and once again it lost. The Treaty of Turkmenchay was even harsher. Iran had to give up more Caucasian territories, pay heavy financial reparations, and perhaps most humiliating of all, grant extraterritorial rights to Russian citizens. That meant Russians could live and operate in Iran without being subject to Iranian laws. It was a clear sign of just how far behind Iran had fallen militarily, politically, and technologically compared to the rising European powers. And with every defeat, the Qajar dynasty lost more legitimacy in the eyes of its people. Meanwhile, Britain was watching and acting. Its priority? Protecting its control over India, which meant keeping a close eye on Iran, especially its eastern borders. In the Anglo-Persian War of 1856 to 1857, Iran tried to retake the city of Herat in present-day Afghanistan. Britain wasn't having it. They invaded, forced Iran to back down, and imposed the Treaty of Paris, which not only pushed Iran out of Afghanistan, but also made it crystal clear who held the real power in the region. Throughout the 1800s, Iran's economy was struggling. Trade was unbalanced, the state was deep in debt, and the Qajar rulers, desperate for cash, started selling off pieces of the country, literally. They granted lucrative concessions to foreign powers. Russia got fishing rights in the Caspian Sea. Britain took control of telegraph lines, tobacco exports, and even river navigation. These deals brought in money, but at a heavy cost. Foreign companies profited, while everyday Iranians saw little to nothing in return. The people knew it, and resentment was growing. By the early 1900s, The Qajar monarchy could barely control the country. Foreign advisors and diplomats had more influence than the Shah himself. In 1907, Britain and Russia didn't even bother hiding it anymore. They signed the Anglo-Russian Convention, dividing Iran into spheres of influence. Russia got the north, Britain the south, and the middle was declared neutral. Iran wasn't even at the table for that decision. People had enough. In 1906, after growing anger over corruption, inequality, and foreign domination, Iran erupted in what became the Persian Constitutional Revolution. Reformers demanded change, a constitution, a parliament called the Majlis, and limits on royal power. The Shah at the time, Muzaffar al-Din, eventually gave in and signed the constitution. But the moment he died, his successor, Muhammad Ali Shah, tried to roll it all back. He dissolved the parliament, cracked down on reformers, and reignited conflict. Meanwhile, Russia sent troops in northern Iran, and British influence tightened in the south. The country was breaking apart, not just from within, but from every direction. By the 1920s, Iran was barely holding together. Local warlords controlled chunks of the country. Foreign powers dominated its economy and politics. The Qajar dynasty had become little more than a shadow. And then came Reza Khan, a military officer with ambition and a sharp sense of timing. He staged a coup in 1921. Just 4 years later, in 1925, the Majlis officially removed the last Qajar ruler and declared Reza Khan the new Shah, founding the Pahlavi dynasty. The Qajar era, in the end, was a strange paradox. On one hand, it saw moments of cultural and artistic revival. On the other, it was an age of decline, humiliation, and loss of sovereignty. But it also set the stage for the radical transformations that were about to hit Iran in the 20th century. By the early 20th century, Iran was at a boiling point, but one discovery would change Iran's fate forever: oil. In 1908, vast oil reserves were struck in southwestern Iran. Suddenly, this ancient land was sitting on one of the most valuable resources in the world. And as you might expect, the British wasted no time. They moved in fast, creating the Anglo-Persian Oil Company, the same company that would later become BP. They reaped the profits, built the infrastructure, and controlled the flow of Iranian oil, while ordinary Iranians saw very little of the wealth beneath their feet. Reza Shah wasn't subtle. He wanted a modern Iran, fast. Inspired by European powers, he pushed an aggressive agenda of secularization, centralization, and nationalism. Roads, railways, schools, and factories sprang up. He emphasized Iran's pre-Islamic past, especially the glory of ancient Persia. And he wasn't afraid to use force to reshape the country in his image. But World War II interrupted his plans. Iran's oil and strategic location were simply too important to ignore. In 1941, British and Soviet forces jointly invaded to secure supply lines and ousted Reza Shah. His son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, was placed on the throne. At first, the young Shah ruled under the shadow of foreign powers. But in 1951, a new prime minister, Mohammad Mossadegh, took center stage. Mossadegh was wildly popular and had one major goal: take back control of Iran's oil. He moved to nationalize the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, kicking out the British and reclaiming the resource for the Iranian people. It was bold, it was patriotic, and it made the West panic. In 1953, the CIA and British intelligence orchestrated a coup, Operation Ajax, that overthrew Mossadegh and restored full power to the Shah. It was a turning point that left deep scars in Iran's relationship with the United States and Britain. After the coup, the Shah ruled with growing authority. With American backing, he launched sweeping modernization campaigns known as the White Revolution. Iran boomed economically. Modern schools, land reform, and women's suffrage were introduced. But beneath the surface, unrest was building. The Shah's regime became increasingly autocratic. Safavid, his secret police, ruthlessly silenced dissent. Corruption spread, wealth inequality widened, and many felt the country was losing its soul, trading tradition and sovereignty for for westernization and repression. Opposition came from all directions: students, nationalists, leftists, and most powerfully, the Shia's clergy, led from exile by a radical and charismatic figure, Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. By the late 1970s, protests erupted across the country. What began as demonstrations quickly turned into a revolution. And in 1979, the unthinkable happened. The Shah fled, and Iran became an Islamic republic. Ayatollah Khomeini returned to lead a new regime that turned Iran into a theocracy. Islamic law was now the foundation of the state, and clerics held ultimate authority. But the revolution didn't bring calm. Later that same year, angry revolutionary students stormed the U.S. Embassy in Tehran and took 52 American diplomats hostage. For 444 days, the world watched a tense standoff unfold, a defining moment that cemented hostility between Iran and the West. Then came war. In 1980, Saddam Hussein's Iraq invaded Iran, hoping to capitalize on the post-revolution chaos. What followed was the Iran-Iraq War, a brutal 8-year conflict marked by trench warfare, chemical weapons, and staggering human loss. Hundreds of thousands died. Cities were reduced to rubble. The war ended in 1988, but the damage lingered. When Khomeini died in 1989, his successor, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, took over as supreme leader, a position he still holds today. The 1990s were a time of recovery and quiet reform. President Rafsanjani focused on rebuilding the economy, while President Mohammad Khatami brought a wave of hope, calling for a dialogue among civilizations and opening small windows for greater freedom of expression. Today, Iran stands as a powerful but complicated player, caught between its ancient roots and modern aspirations, balancing a proud identity with internal struggles and global pressure. Now that we've explored the rich and complex history of this beautiful land, from ancient empires to modern transformations, it's important to turn our attention to a subject that has captured the concern of world leaders and shaped international relations for decades: Iran's nuclear program. Understanding this chapter is key to grasping the ongoing tensions and the delicate balance of diplomacy in the region today. Iran's nuclear journey began in the 1950s under Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, with support from the United States. Through President Eisenhower's Atoms for Peace program, the U.S. helped Iran build its first nuclear research reactor in Tehran, operational by 1967 and fueled by highly enriched uranium supplied directly by the U.S. In 1968, Iran signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, pledging not to pursue nuclear weapons. But the Shah had bigger dreams. By the 1970s, he envisioned dozens of nuclear power plants across the country and began laying the groundwork for a full nuclear fuel cycle, including uranium mining and fuel production. Then came the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Western partners pulled out, and Iran's nuclear plans came to a halt, temporarily. Throughout the 1980s, even under sanctions and isolation, Iran quietly resumed its research, developing nuclear technology centers and mining uranium on its own. By the 1990s, Iran's nuclear work took a darker turn. A secret program, known as the Ahmad Plan, sought to design nuclear warheads and pair them with ballistic missiles. While no weapons-grade uranium was produced, the intent was clear. Iran wanted the option to build a bomb. Everything changed in 2002, when an opposition group revealed a secret enrichment site at Natanz. This triggered a global crisis. Iran claimed its program was peaceful, just for energy and medical use. But ongoing enrichment and missile development raised deep suspicions. After years of negotiations, Iran reached the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, JCPOA, in 2015 with the US, UK, France, Russia, China, and Germany. Iran agreed to strict limits on enrichment and inspections in exchange for relief from crushing sanctions. But in 2018, the US withdrew from the deal. Iran responded by stepping up its enrichment again, reaching levels up to 60% purity, alarmingly close to weapons grade. We are fully aware that the tensions between Iran, Israel, and the United States remain some of the most pressing and volatile issues in today's global landscape. Headlines continue to shift, alliances evolve, and the situation unfolds day by day. But this video is not about predicting what might happen next. Instead, it's about understanding how we got here by looking back. Because to truly grasp the weight of today's headlines, we must first understand the centuries of history, ambition, revolution, and resilience that shaped Iran into the nation it is today. This is not a forecast, it is a reflection. Iran's history is a powerful testament to resilience, brilliance, and defiance. From the ruins of Persepolis to the shimmering mosques of Isfahan, from timeless poetry to revolutionary fire, Iran has shaped and been shaped by the very currents of human civilization. It stands today as a living bridge between ancient past and uncertain future, still writing its story, still echoing across the world. I hope this episode helped you better understand this remarkable country, its depth, its complexity, and the enduring spirit of its people. This episode was based on the book Ancient Iran, a captivating guide to Persia by captivating history. And now, as the echoes of the past gently fade, may your thoughts slow, your mind quiet, and your body rest. Until next time, good night and sleep well.